Welcome to the TC Dojo from Single Sourcing Solutions. The TC Dojo is a TechCom community that is driven by you. Tell us what you want to learn. You choose the topics, and we find the experts. In the TC Dojo open session today, we are lucky to have Marcy Phelps. Marcy is an information professional. She's a private investigator, an information researcher. She's been a reference librarian, an information officer, and a public speaking liaison before evolving her career and becoming a private investigator specializing in fraud prevention. The information she gathers helps clients mitigate risk while making business decisions. I met her at the AIIP, Association for Independent Information Professionals, conference a couple of years ago. For those of you who don't know it, AIIP is a partner organization of the STC, and Marcy is a past president. It's been my good fortune to get to know Marcy over the last couple of years, and we're grateful she agreed to be our visiting TC Dojo Master today. Marcy has a lot to cover, so she wants to save questions until the end. Be sure to type them in when you think of them so you don't forget what you wanted to ask. Marcy, it's all yours.
Great. I'm excited to be here and have a chance to talk about transforming careers. It's such a relevant topic nowadays because very few of us travel a traditional career path, the straight line from the start of your career where you kind of have an idea of where you're going. So as I was saying, very few of us travel the traditional career path where you can see where you're going and your employer trains you and promotes you and you wind up with your gold watch at your retirement party. Nowadays, career paths are a little more freeform. Lots of twists and turns that take us in different directions. And I probably should have even put a couple of breaks in the line because some of us take breaks to reevaluate, maybe stay home with kids or take care of aging parents. But you no longer can predict where we'll be in 10 years. And it's a little more difficult to know what's coming around the bend. Career change nowadays is just a constant. It's part of your professional life. Maybe you're taking a new direction or somebody else is forcing you to take a new direction. Client and employer needs evolve, so we have to change directions sometimes because of that. The trick is to embrace these changes, not let them stop us in our tracks or move us to pine for the way it used to be because it's not coming back. And we need to grow and learn from them. As you heard in my bio, I'm not a career expert, but I've taken some big twists and turns in my career. I started out, actually, I went back to grad school. I had one of those, what do I want to be when my kids grow up moments, and decided to go back to grad school, during which time I did a lot of volunteer work. And I just want to emphasize, don't underestimate the value of volunteer work for learning and making connections. When I finished my master's in library and information science, I worked briefly as a librarian and decided that I wanted to become my own boss. So I launched my business in 2000. First specializing in business and market research, and then eventually pivoting to investigations. I'm now a licensed private investigator and a certified fraud examiner. As a private investigator, it's my job to look at patterns. And when I look back on my career transitions, I remember that it was stressful. The career change is always on the top of those lists of top stressors in people's lives. There's challenging, lots of learning, lots of dedicated time and focus. Also, in looking at patterns, I kind of distilled my tips for survival, my lessons learned, into 5 tips for surviving your career and staying sane in the process. So I will focus today and share with you my 5 tips for surviving career transitions. So my first tip is to make learning a priority and to make, go back to being a beginner. When you're making a career transition, you may be an expert in something, but you're in a new environment using your skills and adding new skills. I had to make a transition when I started my own business. I was pretty good at research and databases, finding my way around databases. But I had to go back to being beginner because I didn't know how to search databases as a business owner, as the person paying for the searches and for my client needs. So you need to remember that it's good to be a beginner. And it's important to set aside dedicated time for study. If you're not going to put it in your calendar, if you're not going to make it intentional, it's not going to happen. There's so many options nowadays: live learning, virtual learning, learning from experts. I follow a lot of experts online and I learn from them. But it's important, as I said, to set aside dedicated time. When I was preparing for my CFE exams, I had it in my calendar, my study times, and I notified my family not to bother me. I also want to point out that a lot of people falsely believe that they're too old to learn, it's too late. And I did go back to school when my kids were in high school, so I was one of the older learners, and I discovered that my life experience and my knowledge was actually a benefit. So my second tip is that even loners can't do it alone. We need a support network. Groups like Liz's TC Dojo for learning and for motivation and for accountability. I'm so glad you mentioned AIP, Liz. I joined AIP as soon as I started my business for the professional development, the connections. As you mentioned, that's how we met, and discounts even on my database products. My business would not be where it is today without AIP. I'm also a member of PI associations, my state and my the national associations, and the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Mastermind, I'm still part of a mastermind group. I've had coaches and mentors, and I still have an accountability partner that helps me get those things done on my list. So we can't do it alone, and I do recommend that everyone taps into a good support system. Not just when you're a beginner, but always. When you're first starting in a transition, you kind of feel like you're flailing around. It's hard to be focused. A lot of unknowns. So it's important to have a plan. And part of that plan is figuring out where you want to go. You can't go anywhere unless you know your destination. I have to say that I've had a lot of people call me for career advice and mentoring. And it surprises me that a lot of people don't seem to have a goal. But you need to know where you're going and what does it take from from here to there. What sort of qualifications do you need? You're missing a credential, more information. Maybe you need some leadership skills. And then you need to do a bit of a self-evaluation. What's missing? I needed to learn when I transitioned to private investigations. I had to learn about public records and court searching, which have their own challenges and are kind of unique. So I made sure I learned those things. And I found ways to get what I needed to get from here to there. And then it's important to emphasize that you need to review and adjust your plan regularly. Because as you go through a transition, you're learning. There's unknowns ahead of you, but you're learning a lot that you can apply and review and adjust your plan accordingly. It's important to be strategic, but you also need to prepare for the unexpected. Like I said, there are so many unknown unknowns that it's pretty impossible sometimes to plan too far in advance. The traditional model of setting 1 and 5 year goals is definitely outmoded with the kind of career paths we're taking these days. So I suggest creating shorter goals. If any of you are familiar with the 12-week year by Brian Moran, it's a book and a program. And I really like the way he explains why we need shorter goals. And sometimes when I'm in the midst of a transition, 12 weeks is even too long. I'll make monthly goals that get reevaluated every week based on what I've learned. And it's important to emphasize the touching base and evaluating your path. I live in Colorado, so I think of skiing. And in downhill skiing, it's not a straight path from the top of the mountain to the bottom. You ski to a certain point where you can see the trails below, where things kind of level off. And you look at the terrain, you look for where the bumps are, where they aren't, in my case, and where the crowds might be. And then you decide what direction you're going in. And then you go down until you reach another point where you have to slow down, evaluate the terrain, and go a little further until you reach your goal. And in skiing, that's the bottom of the hill where a hot toddy is waiting for you. But in your career, you want to reach your goal this way by stopping frequently, evaluating, and making changes as you progress. I like the concept of shorter goals because they help you celebrate small successes. They don't seem as overwhelming as a 1 year or a 5 year goal. And then my final tip is to have faith. When you're in the middle of a transition, it's sometimes hard to see the progress you're making. It's sometimes you're not even sure when you're trying to get there, you're not even sure what there looks like. But it's important to have faith that patience and persistence and pivoting when necessary will get you there. Um, it's also sometimes hard to even make short goals. When I first started working with another PI, and he talked about the possibility of me eventually becoming a PI, I couldn't even imagine what that looked like. So rather than making a big plan, I just set a deadline. And I said, I'm going to try this for 3 months, working with this gentleman and seeing what's involved and if it's something that I'd like to do. So sometimes just setting a deadline and rather than trying to go too far too quickly. It's important to know that even if it doesn't work out, you learn something along the way that will definitely come in handy. I also learned that fear is definitely part of these changes. Changes can be scary, but fear can be managed. As an introvert, for example, I am just, networking scares me like crazy, and it still does. I haven't really gotten over the fear, but I've managed to find workarounds for introverts or for my type of personality that I actually kind of enjoy it now. And I have a friend who kind of reminded me it's almost like a mindset, or sometimes it's a good idea to reframe some of these changes, like saying stepping out of your comfort zone. That sounds kind of overwhelming and painful, but I have a friend who calls it stretching into opportunities. She's reframed it into something positive and exciting. So yes, it's scary, but fear can be managed. So here they are, Marcy's 5 tips or lessons learned for surviving and staying sane during career transitions. I talked about making learning a priority, because the more you know, the more confident you are, and the more progress you'll make. Tapping into a support system, I think a good mix of virtual and in-person types of situations. My mastermind group, we meet in person every 6 weeks. Other groups are more virtual. And while it's important to be strategic, we have to prepare for the unexpected, especially when you don't know what your outcomes are going to be and sometimes what your goals might be. So 90-day goals, monthly goals, even shorter are okay. And then remembering to have faith that you can deal with and work around any obstacles or challenges you encounter. They're not barriers. I found this quote when I was searching for images to use in my presentation, and I really like it. It shows that change and the obstacles that come with it are just a fact of our professional lives. And by creating some coping mechanisms, including a support network, you can work your way through them and follow the path to your goals. So here's my contact information. We're going to have a Q&A if I don't answer your questions. If you have any more questions, feel free to email me, and let's connect on social media. So thank you very much.
Wow, Marcy, that was great.
Thanks.
I really enjoyed that. I am right there with you. Everything you're saying resonates really strongly with me. I am kind of a little blown away, actually. Now it's time to type in those questions if you haven't already. And while you do, here's a look at what's coming up. It's funny you talked about masterminds. We have one that runs every month. It's TechCom oriented. And it's, you know, it's one of those ways of talking about what you're dealing with right now and getting collaborative peer-to-peer feedback, and everyone learns from the experience of each other. It's been really fun to participate in. I love it. We've been doing this a long time. And our next two are coming up the next couple of weeks. We've got a TechCom General and an Arbortext focused one. It's really it's been really fun. It's neat. In the next TC Dojo, we've got a panel coming to talk about career tips and tricks. Over the last year, the voting in the TC Dojo survey has pushed career and soft skill requests to the top. And when we heard about this panel that Linda Ostrich submitted to STC Summit, we jumped on the chance to provide all of these people to you. So we've got some big, long-time STC folks, Jackie Damrow, Judith Glick-Smith, Andrea Ames, George Hayhoe, Dee Muir, and Mary Jo Stark, as well as Linda Ostrich, coming next month. How do you sign up? It's going to be a really good session. Go to tcdojo.org, and that's a short link that will take you to this page. And all you got to do is scroll down to the bottom and sign up and see what's coming up. All right, let's get to the questions. It's hard to embrace being a beginner. Any suggestions for getting over that feeling? Marcy, that's for you.
Oh, yes, that's a good question. You have no choice. You know, if you keep thinking you're an expert when you're really in a beginner situation, you're not doing yourself any favors. So think of it that way. You don't have a choice. It's also temporary. It's eventually you'll get good at what you're doing and you won't be a beginner so long. I'm actually really good at public record searching and I teach it now, but I'm not a beginner, but we're all still learning. So that would be my advice here, to remember that we all need to learn.
Excellent. All right, here's one. You talked about micro adjustments, making changes as you go, evaluating frequently. I've heard them say fail fast. But do you have both long and short goals?
I have more, rather than a long goals, I have a vision. And Brian Moran talks about this in the 12-week year. It's not that you're only looking 12 weeks ahead. I have a clear vision and some long-range goals of the kind of person, the kind of career I want to have in the future, what my retirement or non-retirement might look like. So I have a vision, but I really find that keeping shorter goals, because things just changing so quickly, even now. I think I'm going to go, this new market looks really good. These people need my services. And it turns out they're not interested. So, and I find that out pretty quickly. It doesn't take a long time. So more of a vision than long-term goals.
Cool. All right, interesting. Here's one. I'm glad you talked about fear. What's your favorite fear fighting technique? That's a hard question.
Well, I just have to laugh. I have some silly things and some not so silly. I find over preparation helps when I'm afraid for a presentation, let's say, or a meeting. That really helps. Kind of acknowledging that we all have fears and reframing it, like my friend Kim does with stepping out of your comfort zone. That's a bit, thinking of it as more of a challenge than a painful experience. Experience helps, I think. Some of the things I was afraid of, I'm not so afraid of anymore, because experience has shown me, yes, I can deliver. I can answer my clients' questions. So I think that helps too. So have a little patience that someday you'll have enough experience that it's not so frightening.
Excellent. So, and I have one. You talked about conferences, networking, and volunteering, and that's not something that a lot of people always put together, but I find that those people who do get a different kind of value from that. Can you talk a little bit more about why you volunteer and what you do, like why you do it or how it works for you?
Well, I've been in so many different volunteer positions, and the reason I volunteer is number one is to give back. Um, I don't like to. I say I get a lot out of associations, but I also feel the need to give back, not be just such a taker. I volunteer to learn. Sometimes I will take on a project so I can learn a new skill, um, and make connections. Yeah, you can join an association, you can attend an event here and there, but I think when you work side by side with people in a volunteer position, you really get to know each other. And those are where my best connections have come from. I would not be a PI today if it weren't for people that I worked with on a board of directors. So, who made this referral to me because they knew me well enough by working side by side.
Excellent. That's great. I do too. And what better way to make those connections?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcy. That was fantastic. Thanks for coming to the Single Sourcing Solutions TC Dojo, where it's all about you, what you want to learn. You should always attend a webinar live because you can't ask questions of a video. Subscribe to our TC Dojo mailing list at join.tcdojo.org and never miss another. Every month, we go out and find experts willing to share their expertise based on your votes in the TC Dojo survey. Why should we tell you what to learn? You should tell us. So be sure to vote at survey.tcdojo.org. The TC Dojo is our pleasure to host. As always, if you need more personal help, we're here to take you from the basics to mastery. See you next time.